Hey, good luck.
Good luck.
You.
Oh, I got into safer.
Okay. I'll you have this up in case people want to follow along. And I think a lot of people are just maybe gonna look at the recording. Vach.
Well, who's with us?
Okay. Vach. Okay. For now I'm gonna mute everyone. And what the way I'd like to do it is we'll spend the first maybe 45 minutes going through the Sefer, and then if we have any questions or things to discuss, we can do that then. And it will be recorded. So we'll post the recording Mirz Hashem, uh, the next day or something. Okay, so first, a few words of introduction about Kuntres HaHispaalus and everything. So first of all, the Mitteler Rebbe organizes his Sfarim so that it's it kind of organized into three kavim. There's his Sfarim of Avaida, his Sfarim of Haskalah, and then there's what's called Havana. And it says that in each one he has an introduction, a beginner, intermediate, and an advanced sefer. And so Kuntres HaHispaalus, it says, is his introduction to Avaida, and Shaar Yichud is his introduction to Haskalah. So these are the introductory books. And Kuntres HaHispaalus and Shaar Yichud were really put out as like one series. So this was soon after the passing of the Alter Rebbe. It was a very tumultuous time. It was right after the Napoleonic Wars in Russia, and the Alter Rebbe was running away from Napoleon and passed away. The Mitteler Rebbe was elsewhere looking for a place for the family to settle. And when the Alter Rebbe passed away, and so then this was sometime after that, he's writing this first letter, which is the introduction to Kuntres HaHispaalus. Then he sent out another letter, which is the actual Kuntres HaHispaalus, and then he sent out Shaar Yichud, which was called at that time Kuntres HaHispaalus. So they really form a series, these three letters or kuntresim that were sent out. So that's just a little bit of the historical background on how all this places. And before jumping in to Kuntres HaHispaalus, I want to give a little bit of introduction to some of the concepts because I've seen it can be confusing. It can be a little bit difficult, and I've seen sometimes people learning it and coming out with a conclusion that's one of the mistakes that he says he's trying to preempt. And I think some of the conclusion comes from the fact that um, it seems like the style of the writing and the teaching, especially in those earlier days, was geared towards people that knew a lot more. I'm not, on the one hand, it says the Alter Rebbe open up Hasidus in a way that would relate to every person on their level, and you didn't have to be a big scholar to relate to it and connect to it in a very deep way. But still, there was this core group of the Cheder Aleph and Cheder Beis that the Alter Rebbe made, and I think there was a certain assumption that they didn't really teach Chassidus to people when they were younger. They were already older. They already knew more. And then those people that knew it would teach it, and they had a little bit of a background. So I just want to give a few introductory points to this, to Kuntres HaHispaalus, which I think are also very relevant to a lot of other places, like in Tanya and things. A lot of times there's misconceptions, I think, from not knowing this basic framework. And the idea is that the way that Hasidus and based on Kabbalah, the Arizal looks at the person is that we have the physical body itself, which is made up of the 40 Yesodais. Then there is like the ruchnius part of the body, which we call the Nefesh Bahamis or the Nefesh Tivis. And that is also, like it talks about in Tanya, it's made up of these 4 Yesodais. And that Nefesh Tivis is made up of the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. Those are two malachim, and those are all part of what's called just like the nature, the spiritual aspect of the body. That's sometimes called part of the body. So we're going to refer to somebody serving Hashem within their nefesh tivis as serving Hashem with their guf, with their body, even though it's their nefesh ativis. It's not just their physical body, but it's like a more ruchnius version of that. And it's so again, it's important to note that even the Yetzer Tov is considered part of that. And the idea is because the idea of like a mala is that it's serving Hashem just based on a set nature. It's not really going beyond the nature of the person or the body. And so we're gonna, so there's a one aspect of Avodah to refine and change our nefesh ativis, but then there's a completely higher type of Avodah where we're revealing the nefesh elokis, and that's called serving Hashem with our neshama. And the main difference of that is that it's the nefesh elokis is capable of real altruism, of really doing something where it's intrinsically motivated. Like Rambam describes this, that a person's going to want to know the truth because it's true and do what's right because it's right. And within the nefesh elokis, the avodah of the nefesh elokis, we have two basic levels. We have the way the nefesh elokis comes down into the body, into the nefesh ativis, where it kind of lines up with the nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. It's coming into the mind and the heart, the different aspects of nefesh ativis. And then we have the essence of the nefesh elokis. And so you'll find in Chassidus that there's the idea of the yechida, but there's also like the real essence of the yechida, which is higher. And so the real essence of the nefesh elokis is just the simple desire and motivation to connect to Hashem in whatever way it is. And that's a completely unlimited thing, and it's not defined by any way. And that is something that every single Jew has the same, from the greatest tzaddik to the simplest person. And the main thing that Chassidus wants from us is that we should, whatever we're doing, we should be turned on the level of that nefesh elokis, of that essence of our yechida. That should be plugged into what we're doing. And then it's called, they're turned on, they're serving Hashem with emunah and with mesiras nefesh, and it's coming from that deeper part of themselves. And then there's also an idea that every person on their level should be doing a particular avodah based on their level to refine the nefesh ativis and reveal the nefesh elokis. And that depends, for that, every person is different. And so, for example, these correspond in Tanya, where he talks about in Perek Aleph that the nefesh ativis, the nefesh bahamis of a Jew, has these four yesaides, which are the source of certain negative character traits, and it's also the source of certain good character traits. So that's the bad and the good sides of the nefesh ativis, and that's all from the nature of a person. And then he says there's a nefesh elokis, and within nefesh elokis he describes two things. One, there's the fact that Hashem gives it to us with like man denafach mitaychei nafach, that it's blown with force, and that's the essence of the yechida. And then there's the idea that there's the different levels, like he says, like it's like the head, and the different people on different levels are compared to like different parts of the body, and that's like more the chitzonius part of the nefesh elokis, the way it comes down into the guf, and every person at a different level. So, so the basic idea is that on the one hand, every person, there's an advantage to each part of a type of avodah. There's an advantage to refining our nefesh ativis. There's an advantage to revealing the nefesh elokis. And each person needs to do that on their level. And the main thing is that every person do what's on their level with the essence of their nefesh elokis, the yechida, plugged into it, so that they're doing it in a way that they're really turned on. It's really has that inner sincerity of the nefesh elokis and that mesiras nefesh and that emunah and things like that. So that's the basic idea of what is really the foundation of what he's talking about here and in Tanya and in all of Chassidus, and is this idea. Okay, so now let's take a look. In this letter, the Mitteler is going to describe certain problems that were plaguing the Hasidim at this time, and these confusions continue to persist. In fact, we just recently read Parshas Bereshis. It says that when Adam and Chava were kicked out of Gan Eden, that Hashem put the spinning sword Cherv Misapachas to guard the way to the Eitz HaChaim. And it says in Kabbalah, it's brought in Chassidus, that represents Klippas Naiga. That's the source of Nefesh Ativis. And Klippas Naiga is very confusing to people because the same thing sometimes is mishapech to transform to be good, and sometimes it's mehapech that transforms to be bad. That's the idea that the sword is spinning. And so people have a lot of trouble figuring out the proper balance of these things. Am I supposed to be involved with the Nefesh Ativis, or am I not? Is it good? Is it bad? And a lot of times you could have three people that are serving Hashem and they're doing It's the same action, but for one person, it's coming from the Rav Klippas Noiga. It'd be coming from like the Yitzhahara and their ego. For another person, it'd be coming from the Taiv of Klippas Noiga, and for another person, it'd be coming from Kedusha. And so that's where the confusion comes in here, and like at the beginning of Tanya, where he's laying out all those questions as well. So here he's going to lay it all out to make it clear, but it's only going to be clear if we understand it. So, okay, let's dive in. So this was Igeres Hashlucha Lechlolas Anash Nas Tovkuf Ayin Daled Perkot. This was a letter that the Mitteler sent out in the year Tovkuf Ayin Daled, which is about a year after the Alter Rebbe passed away. Ahuvei Achai Bereya Yedidim Ahuvim is a little bigger. Chaveir Makshivim Asher Nogu Divrei Lekim Chaim B'Moichem B'Libo. So he's sending this letter out to all my beloved friends and the Hasidim, who are all very Haver Makshivim means like they're very attentive, they're very interested in these things, and they were touched by the words of living God, by Hasidus. He always calls here Hasidus, he calls it Divrei Lekim Chaim, the words of the living God, or Dach, like we call it, and it's touched them in their minds and their hearts. Asher kirves elokim chafetzim leprokim v'itim rechoikim kasher yoshev rucham aleim in a bilbul v'saras hazman mitiras parnasa asher be'itim halalu rabu k'may rabu v'tigdal v'tirba ruach aveda kashav meichalim. And so the first thing he's addressing, and this is a problem that we all have, that they desire to spend more time doing Avodah, both in their minds and their hearts, but it's very difficult because it's hard to find the time and the focus because they're so busy with making a parnasa, and especially at this time, again, it was right after the war, and so the situation was very difficult. A lot of people were probably forced out of their towns and had to find other places to, resettle, and the economy was disrupted. So it was a very difficult, particularly difficult time then. But in general, in life, we always have distractions, and there's the challenges of poverty, there's the challenges of wealth, whatever it is, it's very challenging. To the point where we're fulfilling what it says in the pasuk, the nevuah, that the Jewish people were like drunk, but not from wine. That people are just, staggering around without really their senses about them. And all of their wisdom has been swallowed up. And their soul despises food. So this is the description in Tehillim of how first, and he talks about this in Derech Chaim as later, that a person can, if they don't feel the Kabbalah soul, the sense of duty, responsibility, that eventually come to this place where they lose their sensitivity for these things, and eventually they despise food. A person becomes so sick that what normally is healthy, they wouldn't want to eat and things like that. And so also spiritually, a person can come to a place where they're don't have those healthy instincts of how to nourish themselves spiritually, and they come to despise what really is food. And how the sacred gems of Chassidus are just discarded on the street corners. In other words, we have it, and everybody, it's, like the Rebbe always complained that people would buy the books, they'd buy them, put them on the shelf, and they wouldn't learn it. So we have all these treasures that are given to us, but we're not really taking full advantage of it. And these days, we're very, very wealthy with all the treasures, how much Hasidus has been published and printed, and it's recording, so it's all very available. But you still see that there's a big thirst where people don't know what to do with it or how to apply it in a practical way. And a lot of times, I think especially people in yeshiva, they're bachrim, when they're younger, they're inspired, and they get to a certain point where they feel like, okay, but what am I actually supposed to do? How do I really make this part of myself and in my life? And then they don't know what to do, so they give up or something like that. And also, people just get used to living a life where they're just busy with their mundane things, and eventually they stop feeling that pain of not being able to be involved in learning and davening and avodah and all this kind of thing, and they get used to it. Lazais kol ish hayari v'rach alivav asher noga yiras alkim bekirba min urav yiya echshiya v'chafetz bekirvis alkim benafshi levilti yida chas v'shalom. Therefore, every person who is God-fearing and has a soft heart that was touched by the words of Hasidus from their youth, be whichever way it may be, and they desire to be close to God, and they don't want to, God forbid, be an outcast, to be separated. So we have to every now and then stop and try to come up with a plan. How can I add and increase and in my learning and my davening and my avodah? And this is what Rebbeins are supposed to be doing. This is, and every now and then we're supposed to make a cheshbon and nefesh. So the Mitteler says it's time that we pause and think about how we're going to do this. And every now and then we have to do it. אמנם אחר העיין היטב בכלל ופרט אשר ירא כל איש איך שנפלו רבים 10 מייליס אחרנס בעניינס אירס דברי חסידס מזמנים הקדמונים כולו עד שיש לחוש פן ייפול הנפל ויאמר נויש לנפשי כלל. However, after looking carefully at the situation, both in general among all the Chassidim and as an individual, so a person can say, back when we were visiting the Alter Rebbe, things were so good, everybody was so inspired, and now it's gone back, we've like 10 levels, and people could totally give up and say, it's hopeless for the community, it's hopeless for me as an individual. And I think these days we can relate to that a person could think, well, back when we used to go to the Rebbe, it was, we could be inspired and this and that, and now, a person could has to find a different way to connect. And so a person might think that I don't have that same thing, what I'm supposed to do. Or even just a person that used to be involved in being in yeshiva, let's say, and being filled with that environment, and now they're not in that environment, right? So what do we do? Emes yeda darkei v'yuchol kol ish v'ish leida benafshe be'emes dagam sheyedea benafshe shenisrachik midivrei chasidus zman rav mechamas tiras parnasa kaigam. But truth is self-evident. And so every person is able to recognize, if he looks in himself, that, and this is getting to this point, that we have this essential godly connection that doesn't change, that's from our Yechida, that even though it's true that that we may have lost some inspiration or whatever, but he's able to recognize in himself that these distractions that come from makeup parnas and these kind of things aren't really changing his essence, like we'll see. Hagam shalei nimsa eza shinei ligreyusa be'etzem mupusay rak b'meicha b'libay nisreikin b'nismaya ta'aras ara lukim mipnei shekal meicha b'libay him b'tir dachulu. That he's able to recognize that on the one hand, the real nature of his godly soul didn't change. It's just that his mind is preoccupied with his mind and heart are preoccupied with other things. And so therefore he became totally empty of this inspiration. And so this is just a case of like a person that's asleep. When a person's sleeping, it's not like, God forbid, a person pass away. The soul's still there. It's not like the life of the soul left their mind and their heart. Elavadei is certainly still alive. If you wake them up, he'll be alive just like before. So in other words, we have this essential godly soul. We have this yechid that's essentially connected, like we're going to talk about. But if we're not focusing our attention on it, or we're not nourishing it, so the revelation of it won't be there. And so within our minds and hearts and our nefesh hativis, we're going to be lacking that inspiration and the positive influence that it should have. Rak shahachayos behelem b'meichai v'libay shehein neshama v'ruach u'menahelem hu ba begili b'kitza zu ein kol chadash. It's just that this consciousness, this vitality is hidden in their mind and heart when they're sleeping, and the consciousness in the mind is the neshama, the consciousness in the heart is the idea of ruach, and when you wake a person up, they're just being revealed. It's not anything new. It was already there. It's just now coming to be manifest. Kach tirdas parnasa shenikra galus hashchina nikra shena. So too, when a person's involved in preoccupied with making a living or any other distractions, so that's called the galus hashchina, the part of our soul, our godly soul, that, like our yechida, that's called the shchina, the part of us that feels a sense of intrinsic motivation that I need to be connected to godliness and I have a meaning and a purpose to life, that this internal compulsion to live a godly life, that's the shechina within each person. That's the needs of the shechina in the person. It talks about this in the Siddur and Dach in about Tikkun Chatzais there. And when a person gets distracted with worldly things to the point where they lose their awareness of that inner drive to have a higher purpose and meaning in their life, that's called a state of the Golas Shechina on a personal level. Kumaisha Kosov, like it says, Hayinu Kecholmim, that when we describe Golas, we say that we were like dreamers. Kumaisha Kosov Barichos Al Pasach Ani Yeshna Begalusa Belibi Archulu, that I am asleep, but my heart is awake. That in Golas, the heart could be asleep, but really the neshama is always awake. And there's different midrashim on that. V'im yitin Hashem pnai, ashalech lechem b'mirtz Hashem kuntres miyuchad b'nidin sharesh divrei chasidis, asher tzarech kol adam leida b'inin eza parnasa, migolda b'yad katan, ki nazal lehem keheter la'aved avidasim nachrichu. And God willing, if I'll have the time, I'll send a special kuntres about the proper approach to doing business, because it became permissible, people allow themselves to just do their avodah like disconnected from godliness, as if it's a separate thing. As you know, there's my avodah Hashem, and then there's my business, and the two, they compartmentalize their life. I don't know if this kuntres was ever sent out, or he just incorporated it into other maimarim. I'm not aware, what this is. Okay, but the basic idea is, again, that we have this essential thing inside of each of us, which is the needs of the Shekhinah, that's our nefesh kiss, and it's just a matter of revealing it and awakening it in ourselves. And no one takes to heart about why the earth has been destroyed, or there's all this, troubles, God forbid, physically and spiritually. It's because it not because they abandoned the Torah of Hashem. Which again, the Torah is implanted into the soul of every single person on their level. And every person is just going about their business in their life without taking to heart or thinking about what about the Torah or this Avodas Hashem, serving God, which is an essential part. It's like we said, this needs of the Shekhinah. It's part of the nature of the soul of every person. They have this need to be involved, like Rambam describes in very simple terms, that the nefesh kiss, it needs to know the truth because it's true, and it needs to be doing what's right because it's right. It has this intrinsic need to be involved in doing things in this way. And person could, be distracted from that sensitivity, but that's something that's an essential part of them that needs to be nourished and developed. And they compartmentalize their life, where they make a certain time to learn Torah and to hear Chassidus, and they make a separate time to go and do their work. Lava, here avodah means doing business. Lavaid b'chaymer haguf, just to be involved in their physical needs of their body. Lavad ve'ein lazem zechibar klal, and they make no connection between the two. Adrab parud min hakatzaflu. On the contrary, they see them as complete, extremely opposites from each other, and that's part of the problem. Is that if a person sees them as opposites, so then there's this constant tension where I want to be involved in things of meaning, but I also have to be practical and make a living and take care of my body and my family and all these things. And so you have this tension, and even when you do set aside some time, we're not really looking, and this is a big theme in Chassidus, that we don't want to just have a balance of, okay, I'll have 10% of this and 90% of that, or maybe 50-50. We really want to have 100% of both. We want to find a deeper perspective that's able to unite the two, so we can have both all the time. And so we're looking to find that kind of harmony. For the Zois Harag, the Remes Hefsid Gambis Mana Tfila, and this perspective of viewing the two of Chassidus and Avodah and Torah as being one part of life, and then there's the physical things as being a separate part of life, that then ruins or has a negative effect also in the time when a person is going to daven. Ukai Gavna Mina Torah, the same thing when a person wants to learn Torah. Because the enemy then, becomes stronger, and he comes and starts attacking into the home base, into the home territory. To make a person desensitized to in their heart or in their mind, so that it's hard for a person to be inspired or it's hard for a person to concentrate when he does have a good opportunity to learn or daven. So that the sidis that he learns or he thinks about what he's davening won't have the proper effect on him. It's just lip service, just they do it by rote. But their hearts and their mind are very distant because they're filled with other thoughts. And the person's essence of their soul is really swallowed up there. In other words, a person attaches their core identity and their priority to certain things, and anything that's secondary, when a person is doing that, they're always being pulled back to what is really where their essence is. And this is something he talks about in the Maimer Yafash Achas about this problem. Like it says, Nevala Yisrael Hulu, that Yisrael was swallowed up. And so this is a thing, actually, I had an interesting story with this. When I was a bacher in yeshiva, I came back to yeshiva 1 year after Pesach. I was having trouble getting into learning and everything. And I had a chavrusa, and I was talking to him about it. And he said that he once had this problem, and I don't know somebody gave him the eitzah to make sure to come exactly on time to Seder, and then that would, fix the problem. So I did that, and it worked. And later, I came up with learning with Rabbi Markel and things. He talks about this idea of, they call in like I guess psychology, especially with like drug rehab, they call it SUDS, seemingly unimportant decisions. That sometimes, like we have this in our subconscious, we have kind of this list of priorities, and when there's a face-off between two of them, if there's a good reason why one should win over the other, so then okay, that's it doesn't really do that much. But when there's a face-off between two things and there's no real reason why one should win over the other, like if you come a minute late, it's not really going to make a real difference either way, logically. So then it's just a question of like what's really a higher priority. So those little things can actually, reprogram which order your priority list is in your mind. And so sometimes I think that's why if you look at the way Chazal design things, there's certain things like you're not supposed to do before davening and things like that, because it's being careful to keep our priority list shaped the proper way. But anyway, when a person's involved, it's very easy when a person's involved in worldly things and they're not seeing that in the context of just be an extension of their Torah and their Avodah and their Shlichus. So then it becomes a conflict, and eventually, is going to start winning over their desire to learn and daven. That's the nature of the way our psychology works, and that's why, for example, there's this idea of having a pushka and a mezuzah on every door, and having a pushka in your business place, and trying to find different ways of attaching, and also like making a bracha before we do things. There's certain things we're doing where we're trying to make sure that we view everything in the context of our Avodas Hashem. But if we're not careful about that, then it can go the other way. And then we start naturally, just our subconscious starts trying to pull us away from wasting time on things that it sees as unimportant. But even if this is the case, where a person feels that they have tintam amayif alev, or they have trouble even being inspired and concentrating when they do try to learn and daven, nevertheless, a person shouldn't give up on themselves. Because the central nature of the godly soul is to always be inspired and always be interested in godliness, and that nature never changes. But Shiur, even though, again, that's revealed in each person on their level. So that essential essence of the Yechida, that's the same for everyone. Every person, it's going to be revealed. They might have the level of Nefesh revealed, the level of Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida, different levels revealed, like we'll see, but that essential essence of the Nefesh Kiss, every person has the same. And therefore, no matter how far a person falls, it's never too late. They never completely fall. Because the Jewish people are never widowed from the living God. as I know with absolute certainty, as I received from my father, the Alter Rebbe, blessed memory. So this is a fundamental thing that it's never a Jew can never go too far, can never lose their connection, no matter how far they may go. Shahaya hadibar shalchiba matsui elai kimat b'chol yom kama shanim b'nidan tivis u'mechus divrei elikim chayim sheb'chol anshay shleimenu b'chol pratei ifanim b'chol ha'etzos hasrichais sheyedea kol echad ve'echad shlayia taya umatas atzmai b'chol derachav yaskil v'lo yasser yeminu smochu. That it was almost every single day that I heard these words of endearment from my father about this essential, the nature of the Jewish soul, and the power of the words of Chassidus to wake up and connect to that soul, and all the particular ways that this can be revealed and manifest each person on their level. Again, that this essential message of Chassidus is something, and this is a big thing that Alter Rebbe emphasized, was for every single Jew, from the biggest scholar to the simplest person, and all the particular eitzes, the particular strategies or tools that you need for each person on their level so that they won't fool themselves or they won't stray from the proper path or fool themselves to see themselves, and they'll be successful in their avodah. They won't deviate to the right or the left. And this was what Tanya was based on, was collecting all this advice and all these eitzes. But like he says in the introduction, if a person doesn't understand the eitzes from it, they might have to go to an expert. And so the Mitteler here is laying out some of the foundations to understand the Alter Rebbe's process there. It's an interesting thing if you look in the later Rebbe, when they explain Tanya, there are certain things that if you understand what he's saying and you understand the context from later Maimarim or looking up at the source of Kabbalah, certain things are clearly what he means to say, but it's not so clear from just a simple pshat. So there's a lot of misconceptions that prop up, and some of them the Rebbe points out in different letters and other places, So there's a lot of people come away, like I unfortunately see sometimes today where there's students that come out learning Tanya and they come out with, what's the point? Okay, so now, I'm a Russia. That's basically what they come out from Tanya. That's one of the first things he's trying to fix in the first page of Tanya is that, well, if I consider myself a Russia, then I'm going to be depressed or give up. And so they're having that problem. And the correct perspective that the Rebbe makes in the letters and the different Maimarim is really that Tanya wants you to look at yourself as a Beinoni. And even though, and say, well, but sometimes I sin. But the real idea of a Beinoni means that I'm a work in progress and a person, and I'm committed to the process of growing. It's possible the Rebbe says it's not, even though it doesn't seem so clear from the words of Tanya, but a Beinoni could sin and still be a Beinoni because in general that's the level they're on. So that's like an example of this kind of thing of having the right perspective of all this. Okay, Vihine Ata Ace Asher. So this is the basic idea of why he's starting this whole project, is that people are feeling they want to be involved in Torah and Avodah, they want to be involved in Avodah Chassidus, they're feeling a lack of it. It's harder now that they don't get to see the Alter Rebbe. There's a lot of distractions and the situation physically is very difficult after the war, and people are giving up. And so he says you have to realize that no, we always have this central connection. You never give up, and you just have to know the right strategies, and you'll be able to be successful. And now he's going to say that it's his responsibility to lay it out because he knows the strategies. V'hine ata ha'es asher hechrech v'chayva alai lefarsi fasi atayv. Now it's the time where it's an obligation upon me to explain these nice words, l'fnei klolos anshe shleimenu, and lay them out in front of the Hasidim. And these are things that are the whole fundamental foundations of Hasidus all depend and rest on these ideas. That almost all of the Hasidim, from the greatest to the smallest, are confused. They're fooling themselves, or they're confused, and they're going in a crooked path. And they will not, the light of God will not rest on them in this way right? They're not going to have the proper effect. And I think a lot of these persist today, these confusions. And the cause of this mistake and this confusion comes from two things. So the first reason, either divrei Chassidus or darkei Chassidus. Hagam sheshama harba avom pnimiyat ha'esa v'dach v'tirdas ha'olam asher goyrim la kabbalah v'klita shelo yukla b'navshei levavei oifen anos lefi emes lamitay. The first problem is that people are not either they're not accustomed. I think it's mainly they're not accustomed to, but it could be that they at one point were accustomed and they stopped. But to working with Hasidus to apply it to themselves properly. In other words, they know to go and listen to a mimer, to read a mimer, but they were never taught or became accustomed to the process of how do I take this and go through it and work it until I'm able to apply it to myself and internalize it in a way that will have a proper effect. To the point where they don't know what to do with it. So, okay, I learned it, but what good is it? So there's all these ideas, there's all these words, right? There's many people that they know a lot of information, they understand a lot of it in theory, then they say, okay, but what do I actually do with it? And I think this problem completely persists still today, that there's a lot of people, they're learning, and okay, so out of Kabbalah Soul, they'll sit and learn a mimer before davening, or something like that. But then what do you do with it? There's a little bit of inspiration, and then people kind of, give up, but they feel like, okay, maybe that's the whole point. We're not really supposed to do anything with it. We're just supposed to learn it. And they were coming and asking the Mitteler Rebbe, what do I do in davening with all of this that I've learned and that I understood from Chassidus? He sees no connection between the theory of what he's learning and how to apply it in Avodah. וגם אייסם שיודעים איך לעסק בהם, טועים ומטמס עצמם בכמה מיני טוס ושטוסים, אשר יוצאים מדרך האמס לגמרי. The second problem, so first, most people don't have any practice or experience in doing it. And second, even people that do know how to apply it, like there's all kinds of mistakes and pitfalls they're falling into that are taking them away from really following the proper path, which would let them be successful in their Avodah. To the point where they totally go off. Kamei, for example, and this was a problem that was maybe more unique then, Kamei nidun hamavucha shemis spashtus b'chol anshe shleimenu b'inyan hasbeinus im yamik daite v'yatzliach b'meichei yes or iser gomer lenavshei b'vchinas haspilus b'leiv legamri Kamei chaticha di isura mamish mitzad kama taimim klolim shenidmeloi al pia shmua shehaspilus tafsad askolim. And so, for example, in the times of the Mitteler Rebbe, there was this confusion about if a person would be misguided, would contemplate in Chassidus, and to the point where they would become emotionally inspired, that they would consider it forbidden to have any emotional excitement. And this, he says, is based on these rumors, these general rumors that they heard. And this is because there was a time where the Chassidim, especially the Chassidim of Rav Aaron Kalisk, were doing very extreme external things. They would, to show their bittul, they would go out in the summer in a winter coat, and they would do all kinds of extreme things. And they were copying some of the tzaddikim, like that they roll around on the floor when they would daven or say a mimer and things like that. But especially the students of Aaron of Kalisk, it became very popular to do this. And then it was a whole thing where one of them so he attracted a lot of the young Hasidim. It was very exciting for the young Hasidim to go. It was much more. There was basically Aaron, and then there was Mendel Horodaker, who was much more intellectual. And so the young people didn't relate to Mendel Horodaker as much. They all went to Aaron. It was very exciting, but they became extremists. And they did all kinds of extreme things. And then one of them said something, publicly disparaging against the Vilna Gaon, and it caused a big outcry, and that's what caused the Misnagim to want to put the Chassidim in Chayrim. The Magdim, his rich, got very upset. He wanted to, kick Rav Aaron Karlisk out of the Chevra Kadisha, and the Alter Rebbe interceded on his behalf and had him. He agreed that he could remain as part of Rav Aaron could remain as part of the Brotherhood, but he wasn't allowed to teach Chassidim anymore. And then soon after that, he made Aliyah. He went to Eretz Yisrael. And there's a whole story in the Line Gabriv, this letter that the Friedrich Rebbe wrote to the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, and he writes this whole history and he talks about how the one chassid in particular that was a chassid from Aaron, and then he tried to go to Rav Mendel Horodoker, and he couldn't relate to it until he came to the Alter Rebbe, and he was able to find what he was looking for. The Alter Rebbe kind of put the two together, where you didn't have to be a high level and a scholar, but you could still relate to it, but it was still grounded. But because of this, there was a certain time when the Alter Rebbe stopped this idea. He stopped showing this extreme outward excitement, and he told the Chassidim to stop. And then people were confused. So then they thought, oh, maybe you shouldn't have any excitement, and they got confused about what is proper, what's not proper. And like we'll see, the whole point is that it should be sincere. It should be real. It shouldn't be just a outward show. It shouldn't be fake. But people had trouble differentiating that, and till today, it's a hard question that people struggle with. Like, when is it good to focus on chitzonius? When should I focus on pneumius? When should we just have, rules and boundaries? When should I put up a sign, on the wall in shul, or should it just be engraved in our hearts? All these kind of things. What kind of a dress code should we have? People have troubles with all this kind of stuff. And like in Chabad, so we're not into the chitzeni. If you don't decorate our sukkah, we say that the mitzvah itself is a beautiful thing. But what about hiddur mitzvah? Right? So this kind of thing is something that people have trouble wrapping their head around. And here, specifically in Aveda Pnimis, right? There's that question. Like, I'm supposed to be inspired and I'm supposed to enjoy it and have simcha and a geschmack in it, but it's not supposed to be with ego, and I'm not supposed to fake it. It's supposed to be real. And so how do we have that right balance? How do I know if it's good or not? So he's going to lay all of that out in the actual Kuntres HaHispaalus. Okay, v'gam ye'aser iser gam HaHispaalus l'gami v'mayach. And not only do they make it forbidden to have emotional excitement, they also say it's forbidden to have any intellectual excitement. Ad sheyachshev kol minei machshavos chutz nirdam v'yishanu ki yedua ne'amana l'chol asher meida l'emes v'lo menicha divrei emes ke'elu b'frat ke'es asher ein lanu av u'mayra. And so even if they just get intellectually excited, they'll distract themselves by thinking about something else, or they'll take a nap or whatever, as everybody knows if they'll just admit to the truth. And why should we, deny such things that are obviously true, especially now that we don't have the Alter Rebbe, our father and guide. So we have to be honest about the situation, that this mistake is an issue. V'gam V'im ish hayasher be'enav yasa halay b'mat zman yipol hanayfel chas v'shalom bilti tekuma ba'olam chad film. And if people would just do whatever they think is right, so then, God forbid, you could really fall off from the proper path of serving Hashem, and there won't be hope for them, God forbid. They won't come back. No, there's no hope. But we'll lose people, God forbid. And we have this same thing in different forms today, where people want to they want to do Avodah. They don't really know the right path. And instead of really taking the time and effort to see what the Rebbe and the other Rebbeim say and understand the path, people just kind of make up things or based on rumors or this and that, whatever they feel. And sometimes it's very confused. And then, people get bad advice, and it doesn't work for them. And then it causes a lot of frustration. So we have to be honest that it's a problem and be ready to, look to those that really understand the Rebbeim and follow what they're saying. The lozois hine l'shalei mar li mar asher le'isi be'enai v'shamati ba'ozni ta'is v'shtus kazeh asher hu min ha'hepah l'hepah. And so therefore it's very, very bitter to me when I see with my eyes and hear with my ears such foolish mistakes like these that are completely the opposite of what it should be. The whole foundations and of Chassidus, which are more precious than fine gold. The whole point is that it's supposed to affect us, it's supposed to inspire us in our minds and in our hearts. It's supposed to be something that we personally relate to in a very deep, meaningful way. We should find it not just there's one thing to just learn it, but it's not just supposed to be some philosophy. It's not just supposed to be Himmelwerte, that it's speaking about some high spiritual things we don't understand. It's supposed to be something that we can understand and relate to in a very personal way that can inspire us and motivate us and lead us in our life. Bespilus dafka, hein bespilus hamayach hanikra hazana taiva, both in intellectual hispilus, which is called hazana taiva in Hebrew, or in Yiddish, hanikra b'lashon Yiddish, der hert sehr tief. So there's hearing, and then there's der hearing, which means that you feel that it's personally relevant in a very deep way. So whatever we learn, it shouldn't just be a high level or words. It should be something that we can relate to in a personal way. But that requires a certain understanding to see, what does this mean, and how can I see that in my life, and how this is relevant to me. So that's the intellectual excitement. It should be that we're learning it with the focus of how this relates to me, and we should see that. And after a person learns something that they see is personally relevant, they're going to get excited by that, and they're going to have real sincere feelings from that. Like we'll see, like just like physically, if a person won $1 million, they'd be very excited. That person should feel that this is something that's very relevant and is going to help me in my life, and therefore I'm excited by it, both by the possibilities, and then after seeing results, you're excited by the results, and you feel a true love and fear based on it. Like just like, let's say, with health or something like that, if a person learn that doing this is going to make them feel good and this is going to make them feel bad, and then they've tried it and they've experienced it works, so then they're going to love doing what's going to make them feel good, and they're going to fear doing something that's going to make them feel bad. It's a real personal thing. So this is how it should be, and not just in a theoretical way just because of Amunah, but in a way of real experience, real personal experience. Like it says, you should take to heart, right? That the Torah is supposed to be, and our Amunah is supposed to be something that we experience in our life. And this is called God being inside of us, right? That Hashem is inside of me, and each person in their level, every person should have this personal relationship with God and godliness. As is known to anybody who is even a beginner in Chassidus. Ma ma'oid mar li mar kasher ani roya b'mischalchem b'tfilim mipina lepina b'tirus hamachshava pnuya v'yoveshim mikol b'chines HaHispaalus sh'ladaiti borer sh'leinoga aleim ar Hashem ha'olam. Therefore, it's very bitter to me when I see people pacing back and forth from corner to corner during davening, and they're preoccupied with other thoughts, completely dry from any inspiration. And in my mind, it's clear that they've never been touched by the light of Hashem. They never felt this personal inspiration, their connection to these things. And when a person, even if they're thinking about, their davening, the word meaning of the words, or thinking about something that they learned, but they're just thinking the words in a way that's detached from them personally, they don't see how it's at all relevant. That's not even called a good thought. Later, we'll see more about what that means, a good thought, but it's not even called a good thought that Hashem connects to Maisa. And Tanya talks about this idea that if a person doesn't have enough understanding to create a love and fear, that they can at least have in the Tvuna, Smeichin, they can at least have a certain type of understanding that's called a good thought that Hashem connects. But this isn't even that. Because a good thought means that a person really sees that it's true. He really feels, in other words, it's like if you go to a doctor that you trust and he tells you to do something, even if you don't really understand the whole theory, but you really believe it. And so even if you don't fully understand it, you haven't yet experienced the benefit of it, but you trust that it's really true, and therefore you have a certain excitement of anticipation. But a person just thinking words, and it's just a pure philosophy, and it doesn't have any connection to the world or to himself, that's not even called a machshava taiva. That's just called, thinking random thoughts. You might as well just give a person some mantra that's complete nonsense to think. It doesn't have anything to it. Like in worldly things. When a person's thinking about worldly things, they get preoccupied in their thought because they feel that it's relevant to them, to the point where they don't see what's going on, they don't hear what's going on, they get completely preoccupied in what they're doing, and they don't feel anything else. So the sign that a person has this connection to what they're learning is that it should be something they can get preoccupied in. They can really, that shows that they see it as something that's meaningful and relevant. B'lashon Yiddish vertrogen geschmack mit eingreis klep. Chulu shenikra dveikos machshava ad sheyumshach b'pulay mibli yuchol lahates es asmei the machshava zlosa klal klal. That he's completely preoccupied in the thought with a very deep satisfaction. And simply, yeah, person's, he can't distract himself to other things because he's preoccupied with what he's doing. But unfortunately, we don't, it's very rare to find somebody that in their learning Chassidus is going to get preoccupied in what they're thinking about. Shenafsham kshur be'emes bedach chayim heim lenafsham beheim yodim she'ein espilus b'mayach iser adrab zel ikar amitas v'yasaychu. So these people, they truly are connected to Chassidus, and they know very well personally that it's not, this type of excitement is not a bad thing, and on the contrary, that's the main foundation of everything. And these people that have a proper perspective, that this excitement of the heart that other people make forbidden, like a nevela, like something treif, they consider it to be life. Nevala asa b'Yisrael, l'spal hispilus v'chemda believe. He's making a play on words from a pasuk. The pasuk says nevala asa b'Yisrael. There was a abomination done in the Jewish people, or the Jewish people became debased. And he's saying that they've made it a nevela in Yisrael. They've made it forbidden or treif to have any excitement. V'chemda believe in their heart. Acha yitzak tzaka pitemis. A person will spontaneously cry out, and you have a little bit of that where people are embarrassed of sincere, showing of emotion. People are uncomfortable. Somebody, really showing joy like a little kid, or crying, or any of this kind of real sincere outpouring. So even if a person will start getting inspired, they hold it back because they're, and other people, mock it, like we see. Im bekol mariros, whether if it's a spontaneous feeling of bitterness or crying or something like that, all bekol chedva, or a spontaneous joy, yiru hakol, everybody will look at them, yismu, and they'll be astonished, v'yisachaku, and the and the children will laugh at him, ad yavosh v'yikabel tshuva shlema, until he'll be embarrassed and he'll accept upon himself a true tshuva, let's aruchai to contain himself, and not to raise his voice, rak yashuv v'yirdei b'machshava v'yishan hulu, just sit and doze off in his thoughts and fall asleep. So he's being a little sarcastic, but that's the situation. Yeah, okay, I think maybe we'll stop here for now. And yeah, I don't know if you have any questions or comments for today. Yeah, go ahead.
Is this the introduction?
Yeah, this is the introduction. So this is a letter that the Mitteler sent out, and this is the Hakdama of the Kuntres HaHispaalus, and then after this letter, he sent out another Kuntres, which is the actual Kuntres HaHispaalus. Yeah, and then he sent out sometime after that, I don't know exactly when, Shiur as Kuntres HaHispaalus. So it was a 3-part series he sent out to kind of lay the foundations of Hasidus, building on Tanya, but there's a lot of misconceptions that people had then and have now.
I know that, first of all, I want to thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to learn with you and learn the Mitteler Rebbe. I know that Kuntres HaHispaalus is really not very much learned at all. I mean, Kuntres HaHispaalus has followers, but not so much Kuntres HaHispaalus. I know that Rav Aaron Shashula, there was a conceptual conflict between the two, that the whole framework of Hispaalus was in debate. Should it be an external Hispaalus versus a more like internal? I think the academics call it quietism or something. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm assuming that that'll be addressed as well at some point. And I'm just excited about this because I think the 5, what we call the psycho-spiritual states of being, are so difficult to grasp. So I'm very excited to hear about the application of what this is. I'm a therapist, so how is this utilized to help people? And there's bonus. I'm finding it very exciting. So I want to thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, sure. I think, I think it's, it's very, it has, the potential of being very practical for people. I think it does take a certain effort to understand and a certain effort to, apply and bring to people. But I think it could be definitely brought to a lot more people Even in just, everyday learning a sikha, learning a mimer, whatever they're learning already, to just take a few extra steps to be able to understand it in a very relevant way and apply it in a relevant way. And then, use it and see the connections to both their davening and the rest of their day. Yeah. So I think it's a, real, can be really beneficial to people in a lot of ways. Yeah. So we got a lot of it. Yeah, I think people don't learn it so much because it's a little hard. I think it's hard to understand what he's talking about without some work and effort. Part of that, I think, is just the language. Again, I feel like there was a little bit different language then because more people were familiar maybe with Eitz Chaim and some of these other works. And, in the early times of the Alter Rebbe and the Mitteler Rebbe, and when the people would come, they were already coming having learned, let's say, Reishis Chachma and the Kisvei Arizal and the Zayar. They're already familiar with these things more. So I think as Chassidus went on, it built up much more of its own internal language. Especially once Tzemach Tzibim was started, they started teaching Chassidus to Bachrim. Before that, it was really only learned by older people that were already married. It used to be even within earlier generations, people had to know Shar Yichud before they could come here a mimer, apparently. Although I'm not totally sure how that worked with, it says there were some simple people that would just know the Dibra Maskell. So I don't know how those two things fit, but so
I was told once that the Tanya and the Kuntres and Tanya Shari of the Tanya are parallel to Kuntres HaHispaalus and Kuntres HaHispaalus. Would you agree with that?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, definitely, like, again, there's the Haskalah side of Chassidus and the Avodah side of Chassidus. So in Tanya, Shariach of Emunah is the basics of the Haskalah, like the philosophy of Chassidus. And then Likutei Amarim is, Likutei Amarim and Shari Tshuva. I think Likutei Amarim is more parallel to the Avodah side, where it's giving advice on how to serve Hashem. And then Igeres HaTshuva is kind of like a prerequisite that he's going to talk about also Kuntres HaHispaalus, that a person needs to, before they start doing Avodah, they have to first prepare themselves with a certain, coming with a perspective of Tshuva. And he talks about that in Kuntres HaHispaalus and in Shari Yichud. And then later he wrote books, focus on that, Shari Tshuva, Chelik Aleph, Shari Tshuva, Chelik Beis, and Derek Chaim. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a connection. Like you see in Shari Tshuva, you always have Shari Tshuva and then Shari Tefillah. He divides into those two halves. So I would say that both Likutei Amarim and Shari Tshuva are like the two sides of Avodah that a person has to have. You have to be, feel how far you are and how close you can come, or you have to have both. So
would you say that these states that the Mitteler Rebbe is going to outline in the coming weeks, do you believe that they were the description of the Alter Rebbe's description of these 5 states, or these Chedushim? I've always wondered that, because I've seen references to some of what the Mitteler Rebbe is going to speak in the Tanya, kind of like noted and moved on from. So did the Mitteler, from your perspective, did the Mitteler come to be Masbir, what the Alter Rebbe laid out? Was this something, or just organizing it? What was happening in that period? What Mitteler Rebbe was trying to accomplish?
I mean, he clearly says, and I think in general, his entire life, he viewed himself as just explaining what the Alter Rebbe said.
I see.
And I think, and if you look, almost every mimer of the Mitteler Rebbe is basically a shiur on a mimer of the Alter Rebbe. You can go look at the mimer of the Alter Rebbe, and that might be 2 pages. And the Mitteler Rebbe takes the exact mimer and he adds like a shiur, like he's teaching it, and he gives explanations for maybe 10 pages, 20 pages. So that was his whole thing. And all of the Rebbeim, until the Rebbe, would only really quote the Alter Rebbe. because they viewed the whole Chassidus Chabad as the teachings of the Alter Rebbe, and they were just explaining it. So even when they were like, there's certain Maimarim, let's say of the Rebbe Rashab, where he'll be taking a Maimar of the Mitteler Rebbe and saying it verbatim with added explanations, but he won't quote the Mitteler Rebbe, he'll just quote the Alter Rebbe. So I think all the Rebbeim viewed it, and I think it's all completely found in the teachings of the Alter Rebbe. And not only that, the Alter Rebbe himself viewed himself as just giving over what was and compiling what was there earlier. So I think that all of this you find in earlier sources as well, but it wasn't laid out in this way that was maybe so clear and understood to people. But yeah, I think it's definitely based on what the Alter Rebbe says. I mean, he even says like he's going to say that this is all the advice that he heard every day from the Alter Rebbe, and this was a project the Alter Rebbe wanted to do, and then right before he passed away, and was talking about doing so.
Fantastic. Okay,
Yeah.
very excited. Looking forward.
Okay, good luck. Next week I'm going to be out of town for Bar Mitzvah, but then after the week after that, Mitzvah Shem will continue.
And I'm sure David's going to post on the WhatsApp group.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Good luck.
A good week.
Yeah.